Hello, this is Faith at Faith&books. I'm getting more subscribers, so I think I might be up to 92 or 93, which is rather thrilling. So I have to think of something to do if I ever make it up to 100. I don't know what people might be interested in. I was thinking of a giveaway because I found an extra but nice penguin edition of Ivanhoe. Would that be something people would want? I'm not quite sure what to do. Anyway, that's down the road though, but it's nice to have subscribers, so thank you. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that I have any subscribers at all. Anyway, when I was so flustered when I made my top 10 nonfiction list that I actually didn't get to the one that I considered number 10. I had cheated and I'd made two of the books, one unit. I'd put together the phonics pathways and the Farnsworth's classical classical English rhetoric into just one entry there. And then my last book was going to be this one, Charlotte Mason Companion, Personal Reflections on the Gentle Art of Learning by Carrie Andreola. And I picked this one because it wound up influencing my whole style of homeschooling, which I did for 21 years. And I read this, I think this was the second book I ever read on homeschooling, like actually read the whole thing. And I didn't realize it, and through the years I studied lots of different philosophies of education. But this one, I think because I read it so early on, it clicked with me. It just really spoke to my own understanding of what education really is. So Charlotte Mason was this Edwardian governess, and then she established her own school for teaching governesses and teachers, and what were they called? The initials were the PNEU. I forget what that stands for. But anyway, she wrote a lot about her theory of education, and there's this nice set you can get of all her writings. And I've only glanced through and read parts of it. Volume number 6 is really the most useful because it's sort of she wrote it towards the end, and it's the most developed. But she's very, very influential in the homeschooling world. And this lady, Karen Andreola, I think was pretty much, very much the cause of her popularity. She really brought her over from England. She was living in England. Charlotte Mason was English. Karen Andreola was living in England and interested in education. She had young children, and she found out about Charlotte Mason and really got into researching about her. And then when she moved back to the States, she sort of brought that with her. And in fact, she and her husband founded the Charlotte Mason Research and Supply Company, which published this, because this hadn't been published before. And now it's really gotten a revival, and there are private schools now. Often they have the word Ambleside in the name because that was the area where Charlotte Mason settled in the Lake District in England. And so the whole reason why this this book influenced me, and it's a nonfiction book, but also the reason why Charlotte Mason really resonated with me is one of her principles of education is to use living books to educate the child. So she was very much into reading aloud to children using what she called living books, which really meant a book written more or less in a narrative way by someone the author was someone who was passionate and an expert on the particular topic. So, and then the teacher just reads aloud. So it's very classical, like if you go to, St. John's College in Annapolis, or like a classical Socratic base school, they don't call the teachers, they call them mentors because they consider that the material that you're actually reading is what teaches you. And she was the same way, that you just get out of the way. You read the book. It's written by someone who is teaching through what they wrote. You read the book, and then you train the child's attention by reading in short snippets and having the child narrate back to you what it is that they heard. So that was her method, and she used living books as the sort of the the foundation or the skeleton or the scaffold that all the education was built around. And I just love that idea because I had already been reading aloud to my kids since practically in utero. So it was a very natural progression. But I never was very rigid or strict about applying other things. We did do copy work. That was another thing she did, but we weren't very rigid. We were very relaxed or unschoolish in the younger years. And then when the kids got into high school, they sort of started taking classes online or at the community college or at the co-op, or we would plan like group classes where we'd invite other kids over to learn with us. So it took on a different flavor than when they were younger. But Charlotte Mason just really resonated with me. And this book was and the thing is, I don't even really like her writing style. It's kind of choppy or something. There's something about it that the rhythm of it that it made it hard for me to get into it. But I just read the whole thing several times, and it's her whole approach, her love for learning, just the sheer coziness of it, and the respect for children, letting them bloom in their own time, creating an atmosphere in your home that's going to stimulate learning, give them opportunities to ask questions, and just the focus on beauty and on virtue and nature, all that. This turned out to be a really, really seminal book in terms of my unschooling / homeschooling philosophy. So I wanted to give this its proper due. I forgot it. I actually put it down somewhere because I was so flustered in getting up and down trying to record that last video, and so I inadvertently left it off the list. So this is a very good book, and if you're considering homeschooling, I highly recommend reading it and learning more about Charlotte Mason because I really, really liked her. And that made me think of other books, other children books that sort of lend themselves to the idea of homeschooling or home education. And this is especially triggered right now for me because I'm reading Little Men for A Year with Louisa May, and Plumfield is the name of their school, right? That was Aunt March's home, Plumfield, and Joe inherits it when Aunt March passes away, and she turns it into this boys' school. And I'd only ever read Little Women. So when I first started homeschooling, I kept hearing people would name their homeschool Plumfield Academy or something like that, or there would be references to Plumfield, and I didn't quite understand what they meant until years in. I finally read the book Little Men and realized, that's what they were getting at, that they wanted to emulate the same kind of education that Joe is giving the boys and Daisy and Nan at Plumfield in their own homes, and that's why they were making all these references or naming their schools. Homeschoolers like to name their schools. You don't really have to, of course, but in certain states, I think California is the one I really know, you can't actually homeschool. You have to register as a private school, and so you have to give your school a name. But a lot of times you'll be filling out forms or something, and I don't know, to participate in something, like you want to go on a field trip at a museum or something, and they'll ask you what school you're from, and sometimes you sort of make up a school name. And so I kept running across homeschoolers that had named their school Plumfield. So anyway, so now that I'm reading the book, Little Men again, I'm really, it's bringing back all these wonderful memories. And I was thinking, what other books, what other children's books give you that sense of how of the joy of learning and of respecting kids and letting them learn through imagination and through warm affection and exploring the world. And so I went through my books and I found a few of them. So this is just a list, or not a list, I'm just showing you a few books that, a few fiction, children's literature, and then I'll also show you some other books that are nonfiction about homeschooling / unschooling. So anyway, one of these is Understood Betsy by Dorothy Canfield Fisher. She was really influenced by Montessori. And this book is just really charming, and it's about this young girl who's grown up kind of spoiled by two spinster aunts but kind of neglected at the same time. And she winds up moving in with this family and going to this small neighborhood school where she gets to do things. It's very much, Montessori is really into children's work, so that they set up materials so that the children can go and figure it out themselves, very age appropriate, and they go and they can learn on their own, sort of. And so this book, Understood Betsy, is really charming. I mean, it's pretty popular and a lot of people are familiar with it, but it really gives you an idea of how you might want to facilitate a child's learning. The really charming book. Another one is a book by Elizabeth Goudge, Linnets and Valerians. And she's the one that wrote The Little White Horse, which I think got made into a movie. And I think J.K. Rowling, however you say her name, said it was her favorite book when she was a little girl, The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge. And Elizabeth Goudge wrote a lot of adult books too. But this one, Linnets and Valerians, are about these 4 siblings who wind up being taught by, I think it's their grandfather, or is it an uncle? I think it's their grandfather. There's like long lost grandfather. And he had been like a headmaster or had run a classical school. So he decides to educate them at home. So it's fun that he's like, they're learning Latin and he's trying to teach them at home, and then they keep getting interrupted, which is what happens when you homeschool, because life always intervenes. And so at the same time that they're trying to learn at home, they're going on these magical adventures in the countryside. It's a really charming, charming book. I highly recommend it. And it really gives you, it just made me smile the whole time I was reading it, because it really gives you a glimpse into what it's like to try to learn at home. And then this actually isn't representative of, I'm just holding this up because it's the author, Eleanor Estes. She wrote this whole series about the Moffat children. But the one book that I had in mind that I couldn't find, maybe I never owned it, maybe we got it out of the library, was the Moffat Museum, where the kids decide to put together their own museum. And so they have these collections of things that they've really learned about, and they set it up. I think they have a barn or something in their stable or something. Anyway, the whole book that's just a type of thing that unschoolers or relaxed kids do at home. They like to collect things, and then they become experts in that particular thing because they're very passionate about it. And then they like to, display things. And so that book really illustrated too, just sort of the natural learning. My kids, I have one in particular who really liked to collect bones. They would go out into the woods and they brought back deer antlers and various bones of animals that they found. We tried to keep them outside. But that sort of thing. And then they learn about the animals or whatever it is that they're collecting that they've become passionate about. So those were 3 books that I could think of. And then these are the books that I really liked that really inspired me. I'm going to take a drink. I always get so parched when I'm talking. Here's some of the books, and I'll do this really quickly, that inspired me when I was homeschooling, besides the Charlotte Mason companion one. Here's Maria Montessori, The Secret of Childhood. She just had such a wonderful sense of what children needed when, and how they approach things, how they learn best. She's just, anything by her is good. This book, The Joyful Homeschooler, by Mary Hood. This is a Christian woman who has a PhD in education, and she sort of used the Montessori idea, but at home, and not in like a formal Montessori way, but her way of homeschooling was to sort of set up different stations in her house, and the kids could just gravitate to the math station or the writing station or whatever. And I got to read this quote from her, which I thought was really good. Well, I'll end with that. I'll end with that quote. This was a really fun book, The Unschooling Handbook by Mary Griffith. This just gives you an idea of how to learn from the real world. What are all the resources out there, how to get involved in different groups, how to incorporate learning math and history and all sorts of things into your everyday life. So this is very upbeat and practical book on home learning, on unschooling. And then let's see, then this was another book that I really loved too, and this guy, let me have his name, Andrew Campbell. He was a Latinist, and he wrote the Latin-centric curriculum. But what I liked about him, his approach was he also thought children should have lots of time to play, use their imagination, imitate what work alongside you in your chores and that sort of thing. So he practiced the concept of multum non multa, meaning much, not many. So you go deep in a few things, and that will be better than just doing, an inch deep and a mile wide kind of education, which is, I think, the type of education we try to give kids now. But this is the opposite. So he also had the idea of living books, that you read out really, really good and great books to your kids. And you just spent a little bit of time, teaching them Latin, teaching them math, and then give them a lot of time to just play and explore and read on their own. So I really enjoyed this one. He came out with a second edition, which was much more regimented and scheduled. I liked the first one best. I really thought that he had some good ideas, and he had a good balance between academics and natural learning. So I really liked him. This is a wonderful book, For the Love of Literature. This is basically a book list of all it's Catholic. The woman who wrote this actually started an online homeschool academy called Homeschool Connections. But this is a great resource because on any topic, she'll just give you a list of living books that your kids can either read on their own or you can read aloud to them. So this is a really fun and useful resource. And let's see, this is also classical, but a more relaxed classical than sort of a brick and mortar. A lot of homeschoolers who were into classical education tend to just want to imitate the brick and mortar school, and they just, everything's graded, and you have to sit down and, you spend 6 hours at a desk doing work. But not everybody, especially Charlotte Mason, not everybody agrees with that. That's sort of neoclassical, kind of based on Dorothy L. Sayers wrote an essay, and I forget now, it's escaping me the name, but that sort of started the neoclassical movement. But not everybody agrees with that. And this lady doesn't either. It's a Trivium Mastery, The Intersection of Three Roads, by Diane B. Lockman. And she really, she has a brilliant way of simplifying everything, and then accommodating it to the learner, but still having the overarching pedagogy be classical in orientation. So this is kind of an obscure book. I don't think you find this that easily. Who published it? Anyway, I found this very, very helpful, Trivium Mastery. And then this was one of the earliest books I read after Charlotte Mason Companion. And this is just a fun collection of 30 families that talk about how a day in the life of their homeschooling. It's really, really interesting to get a glimpse into each of their days and how the different families had different philosophies for homeschooling. So, okay, I'm talking too long on a subject that is really obscure, but, you know, homeschooling was my life for a long time, and it had to do with books. I mean, the core of my homeschooling was reading out loud and reading good books. Anyway, so a lot of people say, well, how do you homeschool? So, you know, how do you do it? I don't understand. How can I be a mother and a teacher? And this is something that I think is very wise. I'll close with this. Okay. This is from Mary Hood, the Joyful Homeschooler. I believe that any homeschooling mother who adequately fulfills her responsibilities as a wife and mother will automatically also fulfill her responsibilities as a homeschooler. When neophyte homeschoolers ask me what kind of roles I play in our day-to-day lives, I ask them to consider the roles that are taken on by a mother who is at home with her preschoolers and try to adapt those roles to the changing requirements of older children. Mothers of preschoolers typically do not regard themselves as teachers. Nevertheless, they take their children on outings to the park, the playground, the zoo, and the library. They have the children in tow when they venture out into the community, doing their grocery shopping and going on trips to the post office and the bank. They play games with the children and read to them at night. They purchase materials that will encourage learning, such as blocks, educational toys, Legos, and dolls. They occasionally pause to play along with the children, but they do not automatically stop their own lives in midstream in order to participate for 4 or 5 hours a day in their children's learning. They have some goals concerning the proper growth and development of their children and constantly monitor their development to see if it appears to be on track. If children seem slow when it comes to walking or talking, the mothers may go to a professional for assistance or for a diagnosis, but they do not automatically turn over the decision-making process to that professional. Anyway, so that's they set goals, observe progress, encourage growth, and fill in apparent gaps. They maintain balance by ensuring that the children do not become either overstimulated or bored. In short, they supervise the raising and education of their children without ever becoming teachers or stepping out of their primary roles as mothers. Anyway, I thought that was very insightful and wise. Oh, my books just fell down. All right, okay, that's it for me. Talk to you later. Bye.